Let's do it. What's up, everybody, and welcome to Top 8. I'm David.
I'm Cassidy.
And today we're going to be talking about the eclipse / Mercury retrograde and how it affected us. Yeah. And Cassidy here is amazing with astrology stuff. So she's going to kind of be, kind of telling me about it. I don't really know too much, but we're going to see how it affected me, how it affected her. And it's going to be fun. So let's get into it.
Okay. So obviously everyone saw the eclipse that was visible to both of us this year, which is cool. So the eclipses, you can see them, obviously, they're always going to be there. But in astrology, they have very significant meaning. They're like a big, surprising beginning, ending. It's really an ending. But since it was in Aries, this eclipse, most recent one was in Aries, it was kind of like a dramatic ending, but also a dramatic beginning. Because Aries is the first sign, so it's like a huge beginning. But this was a little unique because it was conjunct Chiron, which is an asteroid, and it represents like the wounded healing. And it also happened like during Mercury retrograde. So Mercury retrograde started on the 1st, and April Fool's Day, which it was kind of a joke. And so, having it happen in Aries, conjunct Chiron, it's with the eclipse there, it's just like a lot of like mishappenings, because that's Mercury retrograde, with stuff to do with keys and technology, and because that's all Mercury stuff, is like, the little details of things, getting into stuff and getting around stuff and making sure all the details are there. But then having it happen in Chiron, it's the wounded healer, and so it's like it's like a little key symbol in the chart, and so it's like almost like a dead dead giveaway that something could happen with an actual physical key. And which did happen, so we'll get into that. But
definitely did.
So then the eclipses, it's just a dramatic ending, a dramatic change happening. It's just huge change that could happen, and it depends on how intense it is for you. All of the eclipses, because there's eclipses every year, it depends on how intense it is for you, depending on what is in your birth chart. But the eclipse was in Aries, and so it was very like abrupt and like intense and dramatic and just like whoa. And it could be like surprising things happening, just popping up out of nowhere. And so in David's chart, it's in his 7th house, this Aries eclipse, because David's a Libra rising, and so it was affecting. Having something affect your 1st house is like huge in astrology, and so it was a very pivotal change in his life. All of all of this energy in Aries, and by counterpoint in Libra, it was huge in his life. Very physical changes happened, because that's what happens when it goes on your 1st house. For me, it was all in my 12th house, because I'm a Taurus rising, so Aries is in my 12th house, and then by proxy, a Libra is in my 6th house. So it wasn't something that was so outward, and I don't have anything in Aries that's like, I don't have an angle in Aries or any like, anything else. I just have Lilith there. So does David. So it was shocking at how intense it was for me. This whole, like, all of this Aries energy, a lot of like self-undoing and mental things. And then for David, it was a lot of physical changes. And so we'll get into that. So David's biggest physical change was that he moved to New York.
Yeah. So I moved to Brooklyn, New York. And it's the move to New York is something that I've always wanted to do. Really just for many, many years now. It's just been, I perform and I love coming here, and I come here often to perform in New York City, cabarets and stuff like that. I'm a singer, I'm a performer. And I just found myself coming up here quite a bit, taking off work and stuff like that. So I was like, why not just move there and be closer to what I want to do? Obviously, all my family's in Florida, so it's, it would be sad leaving them, but I just want to kind of try it out and see how it worked. My initial plan was not to move yet. My initial plan was to move in November. And so, it just kind of happened. My friend posted that he was kind of, subletting his place or his room. Like he was trying to, leave and get somebody to take over the lease. And I was like, I haven't replied yet. I liked how it looked. Everything looked nice on the story that he posted, but I just wasn't sure. I was like, it seems kind of soon, because it would have been he posted in the beginning of March, and it was April 1st that someone needed to move in. So I was like, this is a very fast move, and it's kind of scary. But I was like, it doesn't hurt to try. So I contacted him, and then everything just kind of started falling into place. I wasn't expecting it, and I actually told myself that if anything felt forced, then we're not going to do it, and I'm just going to kind of, you know, back out and then try in November, and everything just fell into place. And I was like, okay, this must be meant to be, and it was easy and just got here, just so easy, and I just don't even understand how that happened, especially because I was basically forcing it last year and like many times, and it didn't happen. So I didn't even know if it was in the cards for me for quite a few years. But yeah, so I'm here now. That was the big physical change, physical move, um, and and yeah, it's been
Yeah.
awesome.
So
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't tell David about the eclipses because I'm really into astrology. I follow transits and I follow all the birth chart things. And David humors me. He's just like, he's like, yeah, go for it. So I didn't tell him about the eclipses when they were happening because I already knew he was gonna move. And I was like, oh, that seems very like fated. It seems very like this was meant to happen.
Mhm.
So I didn't tell him about it until David was already in New York. But I already knew about the eclipses when he was still like, am I going to move? Am I not going to move? And I was a little bit like apprehensive about it because I was like, that's pretty sudden, like just suddenly moving.
Mhm.
Because, again, he had decided to do it in November, was planning on doing it in November, December.
Mhm.
So, but the thing is that this was a huge shift for David. This was a huge transit for David in his birth chart. And so the fact that it just came out of nowhere and it was so easy, like David said, it was so easy. Like
Yeah.
things just kept popping up where it was like, okay, well, this is where it's going to derail. This is where it's going to go wrong. This is where things are going to like not work out. And we were like expecting it. David was like expecting that to happen. And it just
Yeah.
never did. It never did. Everything was like too easy. And so
Yeah.
that
It
was
was
the
so
point.
weird.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was the point where we were like, okay, obviously this is meant to be.
Mhm.
And then he moved like right between the two eclipses. So it's like there was one weekend with an eclipse, skip a weekend, and then another weekend with the eclipse. That's just, the moon cycle, full moon, new
Mhm.
moon. And that
And what was
weekend in
it?
between them.
No, sorry, I was going to say, and like, what day wasn't April 1st the eclipse?
No, April 1st was when Mercury went retrograde. The
Oh,
first
that's what we're
day.
going to talk about after. Yeah, yeah, because that's
Yeah.
the day I moved in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
The
okay, that's
eclipse was
right.
the 8th,
Okay, okay,
the
okay.
Aries eclipse, the second one. And
So I
then
moved right in between the two eclipses. Okay,
Mhm.
okay,
Yeah, you
that's
moved right in
crazy.
between the two eclipses, and Mercury
Wow.
went retrograde right in between those two eclipses. Yeah, it was completely meant to be. It was right on your rising sign and your descendant, which is opposite to it, and it was squaring your midheaven and your IC. And so it was on your angles, is what they say in astrology. It's like on your angles, so it's a big deal.
So
And
it's
so
like all this strong energy with the eclipses in between the eclipses, and then I'm moving on the day Mercury goes retrograde. So then there's going to be like some setbacks or something like that. So
yeah,
it's just so weird. It's so crazy how that happened.
there's going to be little hiccups. And so it's like you were completely aligned with those
Mhm.
eclipses. It was just like, oh, this is obviously the work of the eclipses. Like this is supposed to happen.
Yeah,
It was so meant to be. But then of course, Mercury went in retrograde just to make it a little bit fun, a little bit
a little bit
interesting. Like
interesting. Yeah,
give
shake
you
things
some
up.
stories. Give you some stories.
Yeah.
Because that's what happened with both of us. Like the Mercury retrograde thing and the
Mhm.
eclipses in general, they gave us really great stories. So
Yes,
it's
yes, they
funny.
did.
But
Oh
yeah, so the
man.
retrograde.
Yes, that
Yeah.
retrograde. That was interesting because the day I moved in, things just started to shake up, and that's why I have stories now, funny stories. But you mentioned keys being a part
Yeah.
of the whole thing, right? And so
Mhm.
I particularly had three issues, not one, not two, but three in a row. I think wasn't it consecutive days too,
Yeah.
with key issues. So when I first moved in, I did not have my apartment key yet. And so I kind of was just like, all I got was my fob to get into like the call box, like the very front. And so I noticed, like, obviously, like the doors was unlocked most of the time and stuff like that. So I was like assuming, like, everyone knew that I guess, didn't have my key or whatever. And so that was my fault for assuming that. And then so I got back one night. I think it was like a couple nights after I moved in. So I went out later than I expected with my family friend, and I ended up getting back, yeah, super super late, and the door was locked. And I was like, no. So I knocked on the door, obviously, and like I just noticed that like no one was answering. And I tried to like text and call like one of my roommates or whatever. And I think one or two of my roommates or something like that. And kept knocking. I was out there for probably 20 or 30 minutes. Again, to no one else's fault but mine. I should have like talked to my landlord and got my key early, but of course, Mercury retrograde. So
Yeah.
and so it was just crazy. I thought I was gonna have to like sleep out there because just no one was answering anything. And so
Sorry.
um finally it was like super amazing. But like when my roommates came up from the stairs, I guess he was out as well, and he let me in, and then everything was all good.
Yeah.
So then I ended up getting my key, which is totally cool. But it ended up getting stuck inside of the lock one day when I was trying to go out. And so I couldn't, it's like on the outside of the door. So I couldn't leave and go do what I was going to do because I couldn't just leave the key sitting in in the door. And so I had to talk to the maintenance guy and tell him, like I texted him, told him to come, over and help me out. And so he fixed it for me, and that worked. And then the next day, I or is it the next day or the day after? I ended up going out, not super long this time. It was only for like a little bit, and came back, and I had my key, unlocked the door, but then the latch on it was on, and so I couldn't get it. And so like I couldn't get the latch off or whatever. So I ended up just texting my roommate. He came down, let me in. So that was like three key things. Then I also had an issue with my laundry card. So I purchased a laundry card here. You have to purchase one and then put like cash onto it, use it. That's how you use them here. And so I purchased it, and the card comes down like this little slot, and it got stuck. And I literally got like tweezers. I got anything I could. It was just like a small little like kind of slit. Try to pull it out, pull it out. It was like stuck from the back. Like I don't know what was holding on to it, but I really was trying to like pull it, and nothing was happening. So um that was like money gone. Key was stuck in there. I had to contact the landlord via email, and they got me a new card like the next day or so, or next couple of days. But yeah, all these things were happening like the very first few days that I moved in, and I could just not believe it. And I didn't know about the Mercury retrograde, like that it was associated with like the key thing right now with this retrograde, and like I just didn't know that any of this was that energy was a part of it. And so I was just like, what is going on? Like everything seems so perfect. And then I moved in here, and everything was like so crazy for at least like the first few, days to a week, honestly.
Yeah.
And then, but then, yeah, everything smoothed out. Everything has been smooth since then, but like it was insane. So
Hmm.
that's my Mercury retrograde
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He was locked out the first night when he was locked out of his apartment. He called me, and
I did.
I was up because I wake up really early, and he
Yeah.
was just like, "I'm locked out of my place." And I
Yeah.
was like,
I was at the acceptance point. I was like,
mm-hmm.
okay, just gonna,
What are you gonna do?
yeah.
Um, yeah.
And then
So,
your Mercury retrograde experience
okay. Well, Mercury retrograde and eclipses.
and eclipse, both for you. Yes.
So David's changes were very physical that
Yeah.
happened. He physically picked up and moved. Mine were all internal. And let me just like stress how big this was because it's so stupid and it's so dramatic. But oh my God, I'm unhinged. So I grew up watching, this is going to sound so crazy. I grew up watching The Bachelor. I always was watching The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, whatever spin-off shows they had. But I stopped watching it after a certain point because it's a little depressing because no one ends up together. Everyone's heart gets broken. It's really sad. Why would you want to watch that? I like living in Delulu. I like being happy and watching shows that it's like everything is sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
And like, it's really, really easy and really great. I don't like this like huge depth of emotion and this grandiose and these huge gestures and this romance, and then it all taken away. I hate that. I
Hmm.
can't stand it. So I don't watch The Bachelor. I never watch it. I don't watch The Bachelor. I haven't seen it. I watched like a couple of recaps on like YouTube because they'll just recap it and they'll show like a clip or two.
Hmm.
I've watched that of like recent seasons. And so I was kind of keeping up with it, but I was never watching it exclusively because again, I don't like getting engrossed in it and then
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
it work away because I want the love to succeed. And so I'm like, I can't
Yes.
watch that.
Hmm.
And so this season though, Joey's season of The Bachelor, the second I saw him on The Bachelor, I was like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. They're trying to like they're trying to get some more viewership because he's very good looking.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, good for them. But I was like, but I'm still not going to watch. Like, I'm not going to watch it because then I'm going to get too emotionally invested and
Hmm.
then it's going to be sad. And so I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But so as the weeks went on, I was like, okay, eventually, like I knew eventually I was going to watch recaps of it. There's a guy on YouTube that does recaps. And I think his handle is just Bachelor Recap. I think that's
Hmm.
what it is. And he has really great recaps. He's very like, he can understand what's going on. He's very objective and just understands like this is what's actually going on.
Hmm.
And I don't know if anybody watches it, but on The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, all of those shows, drama does come up. There's like a bunch of people in one house fighting for one person.
Hmm.
They're like all dating one person. So there's bound to be drama. And
Hmm.
I avoid that part too. I don't like watching that part either because I'm just like, you know, it doesn't really it never really adds much to the story. I mean, that's not even true. Sometimes it adds everything to the story, but it just takes away from the love experience
Yeah.
ultimately. So yeah, so I try to avoid all that. But I started watching the recaps once they like got down to like more less and less women. Like, you know, once it
Hmm.
was like, okay, top 6 or like top 12 or whatever the number was. Then I was like, okay, so now I'll start watching the recaps, catching up with the season.
Hmm.
And I knew what the spoiler was originally, the original spoiler. And so I was like, okay, that's like, you know, the guy is gonna pick the girl with the like the perfect bachelor story, and she's like a nice, sweet looking blonde. And that's not anything to the girl that I'll get into. It's nothing against her at all. That was just my based off of picture response. I was like, okay, yeah, it's gonna be
Hmm.
like the stereotypical bachelor. He picks the blonde. That's another stereotype in The Bachelor is that there's a bunch of blondes. That's
Yeah.
like a thing. And so they've even talked about it in interviews where they're just like, oh my God, did the guy, like they asked the Bachelor Joey, they're like, did you say that you liked brunettes? Because there's like hardly any blondes. And then it
Oh
was like
yeah.
this joke, you know what I mean? Because they always have like just a plethora of blondes.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and I know that that's like a, you know, there's more depth to people than just their hair color, but it's just a
Yeah.
funny like joke. And so I hopped on that and I was like, oh yeah, he's gonna pick the nice sweet blonde with the perfect story.
Yeah.
But then as the series went on, you kept hearing like more chatter about the drama because there was a lot of drama.
Hmm.
And the girl that was like involved in a lot of the drama, she got a huge online following. She was just like, because she was a very like controversial person in the house, kind of, but then also online. And so controversial people, you get like people that like hate you for no, like they just like, oh, I hate them. But then there you get people that are like diehard fans, and that's
Yeah.
what happened to her. And to be
Yeah.
honest, the girl that was Maria on The Bachelor, I started hearing about her, and then started hearing about the blonde girl Daisy, um, and Maria. She when I saw her, I was like, okay, so maybe he'll like because she was getting further and further along. She was in the top 4, like the
Hmm.
4 women left, and so I was like, oh, okay, so there's actually like they actually must have like a connection or whatever. I kept hearing about her and seeing like whatever little clips or little like recaps of it. And I was like, okay, so maybe he picks the girl who's like involved in all the drama because the bachelor and the girl that's like the villain, she's not really the
Yeah.
villain, but the villain of the story from
Hmm.
my eyes, like objectively, was he might pick her because that's happened before too, where the guy just picks the girl that had all this drama. But typically what happens is the villain is the girl who has a really deep connection with the bachelor,
Hmm.
and some of the other girls have like they're rubbed the wrong way with it. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so that's kind of what I was perceiving just from not officially watching the show yet, just seeing recaps. But then, but then I saw one clip with Kelsey A.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
And spoiler alert, that's the girl he ends up with. And the second I saw her, I was like, oh my God, he has to pick her. The
Yeah.
second I saw a clip of her, I was emotionally invested in the series. That was when I was
Yeah.
emotionally invested because I was just like this is not how I feel now, but I was just like he can't pick the blonde girl, he can't pick the girl who's like in the drama or whatever. He's got to pick this girl
Yeah.
because she was not the normal. She's not the average like bachelorette contestant at all. She's like
Yeah.
stunning, first of all.
Hmm.
Um, they're all beautiful, but she was just not the average girl that you see on The Bachelor.
Hmm.
And so, but really what it was just her essence. You could just tell that she was so unbelievably in love with this
Yeah.
guy. Like it was written all over her face. And so
Yeah.
immediately I related to her because she couldn't hide anything. She
Hmm.
was just like, oh my God, I love him. And I was like, he better choose her
Oh my
because
God.
she loves him so much. What?
And she did, and she chose
Oh, she
him.
did. Okay, yeah, I thought you said yeah. She did choose him, and it was so beautiful. So
That's amazing.
anyway, so I started getting really emotionally involved, and I still was like, okay, I'll just watch recaps. I'll just watch recaps and see like
Yeah.
what happens because I didn't want to get my hopes up.
Hmm.
But then they put out another spoiler, and they're like, oh, we got it wrong. He doesn't pick the blonde girl. Her name's Daisy. We'll get into Daisy. He picks Kelsey A, which is the girl I wanted him to. And so I was like,
Yeah.
oh my god. And then I was
And then
really
you had to
emotionally
watch it. Yeah, yeah.
I had to watch it. So I stayed
Yeah.
up. I
Oh my
watched a
god.
really terrible bootleg version of the live where it
Uh-huh.
was like jump cuts of like really close up of like people's shoulders and stuff like that, really awkward.
Uh-huh.
But the thing I saw, the spoiler I saw, the first thing was the two girls. You don't understand this, so let me break it down. So on The Bachelor, on The
Yeah.
Bachelor and The Bachelorette, it's a unspoken. Actually, it's spoken, but it's like an obvious thing. There's two final people and there's the person that's like the bachelor or the bachelorette. We'll say bachelor because that's what we're talking about. There's the bachelor.
Hmm.
He's typically on a beach and
Hmm.
he's like about to propose. He's about to break up with somebody and then propose to somebody else. And the person that comes out of the car first, the first person to pull up in their car is going to get dumped. That's what happens because obviously you would break up with somebody and then you would get engaged. You'd be like, okay,
Right.
we've eliminated everybody and now here's the final girl.
Hmm.
So that's like the rule, and that's how it's always been. And whatever girl or guy is first is the one that's getting dumped, and then the
Yeah.
second person is getting married. So you're always just like on pins and needles, like, oh my god, who's in the car first? Who's coming out first?
Dang.
And
Oh
so
my
I
god.
opened up Instagram
Hmm.
on the night that the Bachelor premiered. It was like a couple hours later because I was like, okay, obviously they've aired it now. We know what happens. And so I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
okay, let me open up Instagram and I saw a picture of both girls sitting holding hands in the back of a car.
That is so
And that
sad.
that never happens. And it was so
Yeah.
sad. I was like, oh my God, what happened? I was like, what happens? What
Yeah.
happens? And so I just kept looking up spoilers and I kept, finding it or whatever. And then that was when I was like, okay, I have to watch it. And so I started watching that part and then I worked my way backwards because
Yeah.
I watched that part and then I saw him break up with Daisy, the
Hmm.
blonde girl,
Yeah.
and it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean heartbreaking. Like again,
Oh.
this was during the eclipses and so it felt like I was dumped. Like it was so dramatic and I'm so emotional and
You
so
felt
like
it.
I
Yeah.
felt it. I felt dumped because I get it. Like I really do feel I felt so terrible for her, but I was so happy for Kelsey because I wanted him to be with her and that was so meant to be because they wanted to be together. Like it was
Yeah.
so obvious. And then especially afterwards, they've done all these podcasts and stuff like that. He was completely in love with Kelsey and he wanted to be with her. And he
Yeah.
really did see the other girls more as friends.
Hmm.
Um, there was a couple of girls that he had like more of like a chemistry with, a connection with that were like not really seen as friends, but they weren't seen as like someone he would fall in love with.
Hmm. Hmm.
But then Kelsey was just the total, like all of it, you
Yep.
know?
She was just the
And there
one.
are,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And there are no winners and losers. No one's a loser. Like if you put one person, that's going to date this many people, obviously they're going to end up with one person. It's not like,
Yeah.
that's just the odds. It's just what's going to happen.
Yeah. He
So
found his
there are no win.
person. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But the blonde girl Daisy, who got broken up with, she like basically broke up with him because she knew that he was going to break up with her, and she was so emotional. She was so sad the entire time. Like she went and knocked on Kelsey's door and was just like, I know it's not me and I know it's you because they became really close. There was like
Hmm.
countless pictures of them throughout the whole season of them just being really good friends. And she was like, I know, she's like, Kelsey, I know it's you and I know it's not me. So it's okay. And then they rode in the limo together and they
That's
hugged.
so
It was,
hard.
it
Yeah.
was, it was
Especially when you
so,
made good friends with somebody and then
it was, it was
they end
so
up with the man that you
beautiful.
wanted to be with. That is hard.
It was so beautiful because that's the thing. All of these people are such incredible people. No one is a villain. None of them, not
Yeah.
one single person, because
Hmm.
she was so sweet about it. She was so just charming and diplomatic and lovely. And she said exactly the right things, but you could just see on her face. I couldn't even get through it. I cried for 2 weeks straight, just rewatching all of this and feeling like I got dumped because of how she was during this.
Yeah.
And I have to say, she is a Virgo. So I related to her. The girl that was
Daisy.
Daisy was Daisy Virgo, and I really related to her because the way she was just like so calculated in her mind, trying to like
Hmm.
piece together how she felt. I
Hmm.
relate to that. I'm not always like that. I'm typically more like Kelsey, where I can't hide anything. It's just written all over my face, and I'm like, I love you.
Hmm.
Um, but I related to Daisy with how she dealt with the whole like finale and the breakup thing.
Yeah.
But oh my God, just her face and just watching the whole thing, even if you have not seen anything of the
Hmm.
show, if you just watch that whole last thing, the way that it's like emotional, the way that Daisy dealt with it, you could just tell
Yeah.
that she wanted to just go sob and just be
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
done with it,
Because
but she was just
yeah.
holding in her tears, holding in
Yeah.
her sadness because she couldn't.
She loves basically is in love with this man, and
She was
it's
in love
just
with him.
yeah,
She was
that's
completely in
awful.
love with him, and
Yeah.
she knew it wasn't right. And
Hmm. Wow.
it
That
was
is
just it
hard.
was heartbreaking. It was so
Hmm.
heartbreaking. So then with Kelsey A,
Hmm.
who I love and who I
Yeah.
related to immediately, and who I was wanting to like, I wanted him to be with her because she just was so obviously in love with him.
Yeah.
She was talking about, oh my God, okay, the blonde girl Daisy, she has I think Lyme's disease, and she had hearing loss, and so she just got a cochlear implant, and
Oh
so
my God.
she lost her hearing, and then she just had regained it back, and then like a couple months later she went on The Bachelor because they reached out to her. They were like, would you want to go on The Bachelor? And she was a really big fan of the show, so she already knew who Joey was, but she
Yeah.
was like, she had just got her health back. She had just got her hearing back like that same year, like last year in 2023. And then a
Yeah.
couple months later, she wouldn't film this. So she's just like, how could you not love her? Like literally,
Yeah.
how could you not love this girl? And I was looking at it like so objectively and like just assuming, being like,
Hmm.
oh, she's just like this nice, you know,
Yeah.
nice,
Yeah. Because
sweet
you never
blonde.
know what someone's going through. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's on me. Like I'm
Hmm.
just,
Yeah.
that's
No, I
completely
probably
on
would have
me.
been the same way. And then you find out what they're going through, and
Yeah,
you're
and then
like,
you
oh
find out, and then
man,
you're just like, oh my
like,
God, no, they're
yeah,
perfect. She's perfect. Why
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
anybody fall in love with her? But
Hmm.
then Chelsea A, she's just like, she is just the most sweetest, optimistic, happy, funny person ever. She's so sweet.
Hmm.
She's so happy. She was always laughing with everyone, having a great time, being so supportive of everybody. Daisy too, like being really supportive of everybody, but Kelsey's like full of life. Like everyone was saying that she's like a light. She just has this light about her. She's so happy. She's so full of life. She's so sweet. She's so charismatic. And
Yeah.
then you get to the first date. Like their first official date was like on episode 4. So it was like way far into it. You just saw like not Cassidy, projection, Cassidy go lucky. Just like,
Yeah.
'cause honestly, I do feel like that. I do feel like I'm very like, I really like being positive and being like, yay, and being really excited. That's how I am on every day. I'm just like really excitable, and I'll
Yeah.
just like keep on talking. And especially if I like the guy, then I'm just like, can't hide it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I really related to her. But then they showed, so it was their first official date. They had a great date. It was so cute. They were on a little Vespa, and they went on a little picnic, and they just looked so cute and happy. Kelsey and Joey on their first date.
Yeah.
And then they go to the night portion where they're on like an evening date, and she
Hmm.
talks about how her mom had breast cancer and passed away a few years ago, and how
Oh
her
my
dad
God.
took care of her until the very end. And so
Wow.
it's like, how can you not like anybody? Like, how can you
This was
not
Kelsey A.
this is Kelsey A. And so it's
Oh
like,
my
how can you
God.
not love all of them? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And so,
Yeah.
anyway, so I was rooting for her already, but I was just like a huge fan of hers because I just related to her so much. She can't hide how she feels.
Yeah.
Like, if anybody has watched our other episode, I had a crush on David in high school, and I told him every year. I would just be like, I have a crush. I like you. Without even wanting him to date me or thinking he was going to date me, never thinking he was going to date me. But I was just like, I like you. And I would just
Yeah.
tell them. Anybody that I had a crush on, anybody that I liked, I would tell them. I'd be like, I like you. If it wasn't
Yeah.
off by me smiling. So I really related to Kelsey A, but then she had this that just, oh my gosh. And the way she spoke of her mother, it was so beautiful. It was so just, oh, it was so eloquent. So there
Yeah.
was so much more depth to her than you thought. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because she's just like so happy, so smiley, so happy go lucky. But she's like, no, I've been through some shit.
Yeah.
So and so I mean you can't not fall in love with her. I fell in love with Kelsey.
Yeah.
She was the reason I started watching the show. I loved her so much, and I just wanted her to be happy. So anyway, then I watched the show,
Yeah.
and then I fell in love with
In
Joey.
love with Joey.
Like down bad. I fell in love with
Oh,
him.
I know
Oh my
the phone
God.
calls we've had about it. Yeah, she
I'm it
head
was
over heels.
head over heels in love. How could you not fall in love with him? Everyone
Yeah.
fell in love with him. I've been rewatching like so many podcast breakdowns, so many people's like backlogs of it, and everyone just loves him. Every year they have a woman tell all episode where it's all of the girls who it's always when there's only 2 women left and you don't know what the outcome is. It's like right before the finale, right before
Yeah.
you find out who he proposes to.
Yeah.
And they bring back all of the girls that were already like not eliminated, not voted off, but like were already like they already went home. They weren't like his
Hmm.
girl or whatever. They're not losers. They just, it's
Yeah.
so weird because it's not a competition. It's just like, they just weren't his person. And so they all
Yeah.
come back, and obviously there was a bunch of drama that was going on.
Yeah.
But every single girl was like, Joey is so amazing. The bar is set so high for me. Every single girl was like, he's amazing. He's so great. And that's unheard of.
Yeah.
Every season there's somebody who's just like mad, or because the Bachelor will do something wrong, like, oh my
Yeah.
god, the
If
Bachelor
he
is
was just too perfect, no one had
he's just
anything
too
to say about him.
perfect,
They're
he's
just
just
like,
too
you
nice.
don't even know what to say. They're just like, okay, well, if
No,
it's
because
not me,
he's
it's
just,
not me. I'm not gonna hate you. You're
yeah.
too
And so
nice.
and Joey showed up at the woman tell all. He showed up and he was sitting in the audience. I mean, he was sitting in the in the hot seat, sitting
Yeah.
on stage or whatever, and they all were just saying, they were like, this one girl, she was saying that she was getting a lot of hate online, and that Joey reached out to her and was like, are you okay? And she was like, so the
Yeah.
Joey that you see on stage and on the TV, that's really him. He's just like a really good, sweet
Too
guy.
perfect, right?
Too perfect. And so he actually was, this was typically how it happens. He was on the Bachelorette season last year, and he
Mhm.
got his heart broken. He did. The girl picked, he was
Oh,
the
so he was
runner-up.
one of the contestants last
He
year.
was one of the contestants, and he was not picked. And he really thought it was him.
He was in
He
the
really,
top. Do you remember the top what? Or it was just like,
he
was
was
it?
he was the second person, like at the very end where it's like the guy will propose to the girl, because on the Bachelor he proposes to the girl he picks, and then on the Bachelorette the girl will be like, yeah, you're the last one here, and he'll propose to her.
Yeah.
And so
So he
he
was
was,
the top to the last two. Oh my
yeah, and he got his
gosh.
heart broken. I'm there's no way I'm ever gonna go back and watch that. That is the saddest thing ever. I can't even imagine it.
Yeah.
It was a
Wow.
reoccurring theme with him, and it's really cute to look back on now because we know the whole story. Because I keep rewatching it and I keep looking at podcasts and everything like that. It's just so cute. He was so terrified that someone was going to just leave, that
Yeah.
someone's not going to, even though he's the Bachelor and
Mhm.
it's like him to make the choice, he's like, someone has to be chosen. Like they have to want to be chosen.
Yeah.
And so he was just terrified that someone was going to leave at any point in time that he was like falling for. And
Yeah.
now looking back on it, you can tell that he was like really, really, really hoping and praying the whole season that it was going to be Kelsey.
Yeah.
And she was just, she's so sweet, so positive, so optimistic. And she was like, giving him all of the, like, when you would normally date someone, giving him all the clues of like, yeah, I do like you. But on
Yeah.
that show, you have to vocalize it. They've said that in a podcast afterwards, like you have to be able to vocalize it because otherwise the person doesn't know.
Mhm.
And so he was like so emotional on so many episodes. And then finally, when they do the overnight fantasies after they met her family, oh my God, I have to talk about her family. I had like a full crisis watching the show for so many reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll say why, but then it's so funny. So all of the other girls, thus far, like even girls that were like in the top 6, they were like, oh, I'm falling in love with you. I could see myself loving you or whatever. But Kelsey didn't say anything
Mhm.
because it was revealed later on a podcast that she's like, oh yeah, he knows. And it's obvious. Like she has it written all over her face that she's like, I'm in love with you. Like it's so obvious. And then they
Yeah.
go to hometowns and she blurts it out to her dad.
Mhm.
But Joey still doesn't know. Joey has no idea. And so there's like a clip
Wow.
in the following episode of him being so emotional because he's about to go on his date with Kelsey, and he's just hoping that she loves him. That's basically all
Yeah.
it is. And she's just like, he's like,
Aw.
Kelsey's never said the L word before. She's never like spoken about that. So hopefully that could happen. And then she says it that night, and she's like, I told my dad that I loved you. And she's like, I really do love you, Joey. And he's beaming. He's so happy. But you could just see Joey pining for Kelsey,
Yeah.
like the whole show.
Mhm.
But anyway, so
So Joey really affected your eclipse a lot.
Joey, it was like the eclipse of Joey, like honestly.
Yeah.
So because I related to them, the two girls, but I related to Joey as well.
Yeah.
Because he was just so like, I'm terrified that no one's gonna like love me back. I'm gonna love them, but they're not gonna love me back. They're not gonna choose me.
Yeah.
He talks about how he grew up mostly around women. To me, with the eclipses,
Mhm.
every time I watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, I'm just like, okay, what would it look like if I was on that show? What would
Mhm.
it look like? What would it be like? And so I'm like, you imagine yourself like, what would it look like introducing someone to my family on this show, like on camera? And
Mhm.
you're like, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
And you're like, what would it look like at this? How would I feel in that situation? And I feel like everybody does that. And so, so I mean, I guess I can get into the family thing in a second, but no, I really related to Joey because he just wanted someone to choose him so badly, and he really wanted Kelsey, and then she was like just pouring out her love to him, which was just
Hmm.
so amazing and beautiful, and I love
That's
rewatching it.
sweet. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I brought up the dad thing because I don't really have a ton of experiences with men either, other than with you. You're over here, other than with you, and so I wondered that, like, how it would look, going on a show like that and then diving into. I had to look at it. I've never looked at it before. I had
Hmm.
to look at, like, what would it look, how would it come across? How would I explain
Hmm.
my dating history to someone that I was
Yeah.
going to date? Because I've never thought about that before. I'm like, oh, I guess I would have to like explain that.
Hmm.
And it's an interesting it's an interesting story for a later day. It's an interesting story. I don't have much dating history. That's like
Yeah.
the gist of it. I don't have a lot of dating history. um and I was wondering, I was like, I had to be faced with that and figure out how would I tell someone my dating history. And so I had to figure that out. I had to cry it out. I cried a
Hmm.
lot. I
Yeah.
sobbed trying to, doing that one because it was, it's just a whole
Yeah.
mess.
It's good. It's healthy though. I'm really glad that you did though. So
I did.
yeah.
I needed it. I feel. I feel. I
Hmm.
feel. I feel better. I feel
Feel
like I don't have
rebooted.
like.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm like holding on to something, or I'm like not, or I'm like trying to like to not to look at something that I needed to look at.
Right. Yeah.
Um.
It's like that
and-
shadow work. Yeah.
yeah. Exactly. It opens things up for the future rather
Hmm.
than yeah. And then the other thing was, specifically Kelsey, her going
Hmm.
home to her family. She has,
Yeah.
obviously her mother passed away, and
Yeah.
so she's really close to her dad. And that was another thing that was like brought a lot of tears. A
Yeah.
lot of tears. Yep, a lot of tears. My dad is still alive. I know
Yeah.
my dad, but we do not have that kind of relationship.
Yeah.
So that was something I had to be faced with too. There was a lot of themes around guys with this
Yeah.
show.
So it just brought up a lot for you.
It
Yeah.
brought up a lot for me. I cried a lot. I
Hmm.
rewatched a lot, and I just have a lot of respect for everybody involved on that
Hmm.
show. And
And
I
you just
think
so
they're all,
happened to be watching it during the eclipse
yeah, it just, and it was,
energy.
it was ending and premiering during the eclipses. And so I was just like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess this is kind of meant to be, because for me, it was all in my 12th house. So it's like
Hmm.
stuff that people don't see. It's all internal
Yeah.
in my mind and in, all that kind of stuff. And it's in Libra and Aries, which is you versus your relationships. And so that was a lot of
Hmm.
analyzation
Yeah.
of that. But yeah, that was The Bachelor.
That was The Bachelor.
I
That was the eclipses. That was
changed my life.
everything. Oh my God. Oh yeah.
My
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Hmm.
This eclipse in general has just been so insane. Mercury retrograde was insane. Is it still going on? Mercury
I think
retrograde.
I think Mercury went direct, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken, because it is
Okay.
today's the 19th. And so yeah,
Okay.
so Mercury's typically retrograde, I think, for like 2 weeks.
Okay. But
Could be
yeah,
wrong.
so it's all been insane, and hopefully, all that energy will subside soon, and we'll all just be coasting and cruising and back on our, normal stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Cool.
Hmm. But we'll get into some more astrology transits because they're always
Hmm.
happening. And we're going to talk more about astrology and big things that happen to the both of us in our lives with, major transits like Saturn return,
Yeah.
that whole thing.
Mhm.
Because this is what we talk about on the phone all the time.
I know. Yep. So it's all really interesting stuff. It's fun to learn about, and I'm just so fascinated with astrology, and so I love learning from Cassidy about it, and relating it to my life, relating it to hers, and just everything that's going on in the world in general. So
Mhm.
lots of fun. We have a lot more coming for you guys, a lot more content surrounding this theme, and yeah. So make sure to catch the next episode, and thank you all for watching Top 8. We'll see you next time. I guess. Yay. Okay.